Hey, what's up? Oh,
Hey,
oh God! My girlfriend came in just as I joined the call, saying that Dylan wanted to talk to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, wow, that's a lot.
yes, I believe you're a sex haver. I understand.
Got to bring her up. Yeah. All right, how you doing, man? What's up?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. So, I see that you've been getting a lot of heat recently for stuff you've said about Afghanistan.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people on the left are sort of like, I don't want to say bought in because then it sounds like it's a conspiracy or some kind of like scam, but sort of very much overwhelmingly agreed upon that American intervention in most cases is always bad. And this idea that America is just overseas in the Middle East, just bombing like farming villages and stuff all the time, and that America bad, and we need to pull out of the Middle East as a whole right away, the sooner the better, without any knowledge of what's going on there. And I would, at the very least, like if more people in the online left and even outside the online left, at least like knew a little bit of something about what was going on there before saying we should leave, at least like caring about what's going on.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I watched your video, and um, yeah, I disagree with you.
Wait, what do you disagree about?
Like, like half of it.
Okay, like my
So
what do you?
the first
Yeah,
thing
give me an
I would
example. Yeah.
disagree with was how you like designated like the conflict in Afghanistan as Sunni versus Shia. When 90% of the Afghani population is Shia, the only
Mhm.
like population of Sunni in the whole country would be the Hazara population. And the Hazara population of Afghanistan has been like persecuted and like slaughtered by like groups like the Taliban for a very, very long time. I don't think they're in other way like I mean the Shia population has been slaughtered like that's the Shia population has been like slaughtered and oppressed for a very, very, very long time. Like it's a very Sunni dominated country. I think
Mhm.
I don't know how we could classify that conflict as Sunni versus Shia. Is that's like the conflict?
I don't think I said that like the conflict as a whole is like that, but I think what I meant was that there was a sort of like ideological religious difference among a fair amount of people there, especially after the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan back in at the fall of like the Soviet Union or at the end of the Cold War.
What would that be?
Sorry, what?
What would that be?
What year?
No, like what would that difference be?
Oh, just ideological differences, religious differences, and what have you. There was like
Yeah,
I
yeah, but
think
like
from
what specifically though?
so from my understanding and the research that I did, there was a lot of different regions in Afghanistan, and they it's been a little bit since I read about all this, so I don't know every single individual detail, but from everything that I saw, a lot of it was mostly religious differences, ideological differences having to do with like social beliefs, and yeah, that's mostly what comes to mind right off the bat. If you want to tell me more, then I'd be happy to hear it.
Yeah, because as far as I am aware, like the vast majority of the Afghan population follows the Hanafi school of the Hanafi school. I would probably classify a lot of the conflict as more like along like maybe like Pashtun versus Tajik or along those lines. Like with the Taliban, the Pashtun dominated Taliban and conflicts between warlords and the fallout after the Soviet invasion. And the ISI's involvement in Afghanistan. I don't think really the Sunni Shia divide. I think like of course Sunni Shia like kind of is a blanket over a lot of the Middle East for a lot of conflicts that are going on when you talk about like Saudi and Iranian proxy wars. But when we're talking about Afghanistan, um, I don't really think that. I mean, even like the Dari speaking, which would be like the Persian related dialect that is over there, which would be the Tajik population. Like even I think a fair amount of them are Sunnis. So I don't really think like when it comes to that part of this, we could really in Central Asia is really could be classified this really as the Sunni Shia divide.
Yeah, I think that's more of a big deal in like other parts of like the Middle East, a little bit further to the east than where Afghanistan is. What I'm interested about is, do you disagree on my take that America needs to wait either to establish a proper peace deal that agrees with the polling for the citizens of Afghanistan, that they don't want the Taliban to retake power and take away women's right to work or go to school, before, like, we need to agree to a ceasefire or a peace deal that guarantees those rights before America leaves, or strengthen the I don't even know if this one is possible, by the way, to strengthen the military and government of Afghanistan that we've sort of helped build, to be strong enough to withhold the Taliban. I don't know if that's even possible, because I think the Taliban is stronger than it's ever been. Like, what is it, 85,000 troops or something? I don't know.
They have about 85,000 fighters. That's what estimates show. Then you compare that to the military, which has about 30,000, but a lot of those could be like the ghost soldier problem. I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, but it's still something that could be relevant. The thing for me is the Taliban basically control about 13% of the territory. They contest about half of it. That's about 50%. And yeah, they're extremely powerful right now, and that is a huge issue. And I believe in the video you used the numbers that I provided in the thread, right?
Yeah.
They're from the Asia Foundation from 2019. And I agree that the vast majority of Afghans don't want the Taliban to retake power. And the vast majority of Afghans, when you look at the polling and the interests of what they want and what they like, for their interests on like how first their main priority is a strong central government at 86, and then at 85% it is, or I think it was 85% there, and at 84% it is women's rights. And they don't want to negotiate away women's rights in any peace talks or negotiations in any constitution when it comes, for example, women's right to work, women's right to education, things like that the Taliban are completely opposed to ideologically. That's when their form of an Islamic emirate, the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan, they want to bring back. That's the huge ideological, obviously one of the biggest ideological differences between the Taliban and the ruling government headed by Ashraf Ghani and his military, the ANA and the police. So I agree that the vast majority of Afghans don't want them to take power, but the vast majority of Afghans also, if you look at that polling data, believe
they don't want to. Yeah, they want America to pull out, but they don't want it to do it in a way that's going to harm the things they want to happen when it comes to women's rights and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, basically, a majority of Afghans believe that the military can defend itself, but it's a slight majority. It's like 53%, which, in my opinion, is not really like an extremely comforting number, because if I told you, hey, 53% of Americans believe the military could stop an invasion, that wouldn't give you a lot of confidence, would it? Like, that's not really a very high number. But that is a significant data point to point to, and I would also point to the fact that a lot of people believe that the Americans leaving is an important step to there actually being a long-standing peace deal. That there will be no peace deal possible, even with the Taliban, could be attempted with the American government still here. My thing is, I have extreme worries, and I know that the vast majority of Afghans would probably, due to the interests of what they're saying they prioritize in negotiations, would prefer the United States to the Taliban. Only 11% of the population support the Taliban, and out of that 11%, like 1 in 4 of them can't even define why they like the Taliban. That's also from the Asia Foundation, I believe. So my thing is, I want to leave by the September deadline, but I want to continue to support the government through selling them the equipment they need, supporting them through humanitarian assistance, and the repositioning of troops for, of course, if like the Taliban decides to like make Afghanistan a holdout for Al-Qaeda again with training camps and stuff like that. I also agree with the government's decision to leave behind the vast majority of our equipment for the government to use. I know this isn't the best solution possible, but I mean, this isn't like gonna like solve everything. But for me, I don't see any other real option, because even at the end of your video, you say you don't really know there's a solution, and because we don't really have a solution for staying. There's no way we're going to be able to do another troop surge like in 2011. Are we going to be able to move from 2,500 troops up to 130 to 160,000 troops in Afghanistan? That's politically impossible. We can't convince the American population to do that.
Yeah, it's political suicide if anyone tries to suggest that.
Not to mention the fact that it didn't work in 2011. How's it going to work now?
Yeah.
So I want to give the government the best shot possible of having leverage during negotiations. I also like the fact, my biggest criticism of the Trump negotiations with the Taliban was the fact that he did not even have Ashraf Ghani's government at the table for the negotiations. Instead of it being the Taliban, the Afghan government in America, it was just the Taliban in America negotiating. Thankfully, this next round of talks that I think have been delayed in Turkey, the actual Afghan government is going to be participating. This next deal, they are actually taking part in. But when you look at the leverage on the ground, it seems that the Taliban has a lot of wiggle room. And so I want to be able to increase that wiggle room as much as possible up to the September deadline. Would I have been happier if the deadline was pushed slightly back more? Yes, I think having more time to get these contracts in place, withdrawal and everything else would be good, but we also already committed to this agreement, right? And we're already wiggling it a lot because we were supposed to have all the troops out by the May 1st deadline. We are now, what Biden's doing is saying we're going to start withdrawal by May 1st and end by September 11th, the historic date, of course, the 9/11 attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at that as we're already wiggling as much time as possible out of this while trying our best to stay within the realms of the agreement, the peace deal, so it doesn't completely collapse with the Taliban as the Afghan population wants to attempt this peace deal. And so I think this is the best thing we really can do is withdraw, but to continue to support them. My biggest concerns, of course, is going to be the ability for the Afghan government military to have equipment and them being able to do certain tasks that, like repairing their planes, that they haven't been able to, their military hasn't been able to master yet. Thankfully, though, as far as I know, I think I have notes on this. For what I think the defense secretary said is that there will be private military contractors staying behind to deal with some issues of security, logistics, and logistics is important when they're having equipment shortages, and aircraft repairs, which is like a really, really big thing for me because it's one of the few things that the actual government of Afghanistan has as a military strategic advantage over the Taliban is the fact that they have an air force.
Yeah, no, I think any solution, like you said before, and I said in my video, I don't know what is 100% the best possible plan to go with to try to arrive to the best outcome for the people of Afghanistan when it comes to the Taliban. I just really hate, and it makes my blood boil when people who, and I'm not saying I know everything about, I definitely don't know everything about what's, like, I am not a big foreign policy kind of guy, right? This is just a topic that I did, a bit of research on, and I was like, oh, wow, this is a lot more complicated than lefty Twitter led me to believe prior. So I tweeted, hey, it's probably not best that we leave Afghanistan super quickly right now. And people got really angry, and then they mass downvoted my video and were like, you're a liberal who supports imperialism. I would just prefer any solution that doesn't just mean we leave Afghanistan and just be like, okay, we kind of did make this mess a little bit. We're going to just fucking go now. Bye. Any solution that isn't that.
I understand that concern, but it seems like in the beginning of this video, you state your position kind of clearly that we should not be leaving Afghanistan, that is your position, right? But then at the end of the video, you say you don't really have a solution. And do you see how that's like a hard dynamic to hold at the same time?
Wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think at the beginning of the video, I said that leaving Afghanistan by the end of the year, or by 9/11 might be a bad idea because that could be rushing it. And here are some things that I would like to see done. Here's some background on what's going on there, and here are some things that I would like to see done before we leave. I'm pretty sure that was the main point of the video.
Okay. Can I rewatch this start again quick?
Sure.
Okay, give me a moment.
Listen the fuck up. If you're watching this and you're a lefty and you live in America, or even if you don't live in America, most likely you live in America, you are probably anti-war. Hypers in chat, if you're a lefty and you're anti-war, you don't like the way that America engages with other countries for the most part, with imperialism and what have you. Hypers, if that applies to you. Damn right. Damn fucking right you are. So, if you've heard the news that Biden plans to pull all American troops out of Afghanistan by September 11th of this year, you were probably pretty happy to hear that news. I was when I first heard about it. Like, whoa, wow, cool. Yeah, I mean, we've been there for almost 20 years now. We invaded in 2001. It's been like the longest war in American history. Yeah, we should get the fuck out of there. Yeah, why are we still there? What the fuck? Yeah, let's get out of there, right? You probably thought that, right? I imagine every one of you probably thought that. We're all lefties here, you know? Unfortunately, that was going to be one of the topics on today's Hippy Dippy podcast that I was going to go on and we would be debating. And so I did a lot of research on it. As it turns out, it is probably not a good idea at this time for America to pull out of Afghanistan. In fact, I would strongly argue the outcome of doing that would be far worse than if we stayed. Despite all the terrible things that happen because America is meddling there, it would probably be a bad thing if we left.
You don't really make an indication of 1 year. You just said basically it would be bad if we left Afghanistan.
Okay, I apologize for misspeaking. Overall, my meaning in that statement was, and I'm not the best public speaker, was that leaving right now in a rush probably wouldn't be a good idea because I don't think the things that it seems like we need to do before we leave can be done before we leave. You've suggested that it's possible that we could leave, obviously leave our equipment behind, people there that can help support the government of Afghanistan, and still sort of like have those peace talks and have people stationed nearby just in case the Taliban try to come and, take away those women's businesses and take them out of school and everything. And I think they've also said the Taliban have said they're going to kill any Afghan citizen who's been sympathetic to American troops and whatnot.
Yeah. That's also why I believe in offering refugee status for certain Afghans.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
That's also why I believe in offering refugee status for those who want it to certain Afghans who might be under threat from the Taliban.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and any like progressive person who doesn't agree with that is probably a little bit sus.
But there's also the problem that the Afghan government hates when we do that. Not because, of course, they hate their people or something, but because what happens is, well, sometimes if let's say there's an Afghan soldier that does really well, and this actually was a recent scandal, does really well against the Taliban, they'll like get famous, and then they'll be targeted by the Taliban. And so they want to flee because they're specifically being targeted by the Taliban. But then the government wants them to stay because they don't want their best soldiers to just leave once they get really good at the job, right? Which is obviously a problem when you have huge amount of like a huge like motivation problem. A lot of people just will end up just coming, getting trained, and then leaving their posts and never coming back. The ghost soldier problem. And so this is the thing about Afghanistan completely, is I feel like there's two dynamics that people have, and I think it doesn't make sense. And I think it's because a lot of people approach politics in this way, that you have the good option on one side and the bad option on the other side. And these are the two things. And you just achieve the entirety of this option, then you win. And for one group of people right now, it's if we leave Afghanistan, then we win. And the other side is if we stay in Afghanistan, then we win because then we get to keep all these women's rights and all this other. The problem is that when it comes to these situations, they're so uber complicated and overlapping that you can't like make it like a declaration either or a lot of times without being very specific to the situation. And a lot of times, whatever option you choose, there's going to be a lot of downsides. And I think there's a lot of people who can't accept that. They're not willing to bite the bullet. Because the people who want an immediate withdrawal, and I mean an immediate withdrawal, because there's a lot of people who want to withdraw now by the May 1st deadline. The bullet they're not willing to bite, even though, like, I would be willing to bite that bullet in other scenarios, considering, like, strategic situations on the ground, is I am willing to withdraw American troops knowing that women might lose their right to vote and live in public life. Some people have to bite that bullet. Now, on the other side have to bite the bullet of we've been in the country for 20 years. That's a widely unpopular war. And we've had a million mistakes, as you can see in the Afghanistan papers. The war has been poorly managed. And I don't really have a clear strategy for victory. But let's write another blank check for how long this is going to go. And we have no clue when this is going to end. Or who knows if the next president that comes into place is an extreme isolationist, like a Trumpian isolationist, and just does an immediate withdrawal like we saw in Syria, and it's even worse than if it was a reasonable withdrawal. And so obviously both of those options have extreme downsides.
Yeah.
And so that's why my thing is I'm trying to choose the option which still has downsides, still has problems, but does its best and makes the best faith effort to try to achieve what I think is best for the American people while trying to preserve the rights and sovereignty of the Afghan government.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think I would take huge issue if we went about it the way that you said would be best, because I honestly don't know what would be the perfect way to go through with this. I obviously don't think we should remain in Afghanistan all that much longer. In an ideal world, we've been there for almost 20 years now. Um, it's pretty cringe we've been there for so long. Obviously, our presence there is causing a lot of problems, but our lack of presence there would also cause problems, especially when it comes to the government we help build and the rights for women there. A lot of the progressive changes that have taken place. But I guess it's just a matter of the people that are really upsetting me right now, and what really motivated me to make that tweet, who I almost wanted to bait out a little bit just so I could know how many people in my audience are this type of person or whatever, or the people who would hear maybe we should reconsider rushing out to leave Afghanistan, and to hear what their responses would be, and to find out if they even really know the basic idea of what's going on. Like the idea, okay, so we've got our presence in Afghanistan, we've got the government we help build, we've got the Taliban. The Taliban believes this, the Taliban wants to do this. We don't want the Taliban to do this. The Afghan people don't want the Taliban to do this, and so on and so on. Like, I feel like most lefties that commented or called me a liberal imperialist, whatever, probably don't.
It didn't help that you followed the tweet up with, "Hey everyone, I'm a liberal," though. You gotta be honest.
I did bait that one out. After getting called a liberal a few hundred times, I did do the meme post. I did post the meme.
So there's a thing that I've learned very quickly that I need to work hard on myself on doing, and that's not reacting extremely emotionally to people who make me angry on the internet, to make me take a position I don't really hold, just to a little bit spike them. You know what I mean? And a great example would be that there's a lot of people online who, and I don't think these people actually have a huge impact on IRL politics. We refer to them as tankies. And I think in real life, they're politically almost irrelevant. But they say takes that are so bizarre about America's impact on the world, even though I have the reason I got into foreign policy is because I'm critical of American foreign policy. My criticism of the Iraq War, how many of my criticisms that lined up with Barbara Lee, who voted against the Afghanistan war, my problem with Operation Condor, my huge condemnations of Henry Kissinger and the bombing in Cambodia, the terrible war crimes committed by dictators back in South Korea or South America, or our relationship with the Saudi government, or our continuing blockade of Yemen, a million different things that I got involved to be critical of. And I still want to be critical of, and I'm also critical of foreign nations that do horrible things. And sometimes I'll hear criticisms of things that America did, or defenses of things that other nations did, that make me almost so angry. And it almost feels like sometimes that anger is pushing me in the other direction just because of how angry someone made me. And this, a lot of people won't admit this happens, but it does. And I think when people say this doesn't happen to them, I think they're lying. This happened to Destiny in real time. We all saw what happened with the Destiny Lefty arc, right? We see this happen a lot with Bosch and others online. And for me, what that made me do is it made me it made me shift my focus from the stuff I usually talk about to these imbeciles. And it never made me take up, thankfully, a position I didn't believe in. I believe the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was extremely brutal. I believe our intervention in Kuwait in 1991 was 100% justified. There's a million things that I said in response to these people that are I still believe, but there was a risk of it just pushing me, that anger pushing me in the other direction. Much like the anti-SJW cringe compilations pushed people they got so angry at these people who are politically, again, irrelevant, that they pushed them towards the right.
Yeah. No, I don't think I've been like pushed right by these types of people, but I do agree that, and I am certainly not immune to this, by the way, spite-based politics. If a certain group of people, even if they're pretty politically irrelevant outside of Twitter mobs, pisses you off, it's sort of out of spite, you start to take a more extreme version of your position or even a position you don't actually hold. I don't think I've ever gone as far as to like unironically taking a position I don't actually hold. I might meme and do like the I'm a liberal like shitpost tweet. And that's it. But like, no, I definitely agree that happens. It's something that you have to look out for and just make sure you stay steady to your principles, even if you're dealing with people that make you just want to lose your fucking mind.
Do you believe that it all happened in this interaction? Because it seemed that you took the position, and I mean, maybe it seems that that's not what the community petition you wanted to collaborate, but that you didn't want to withdraw. Was it because you saw so many people like this has angered me a lot, and I made a video on it. And I think you saw my video because I think you linked it a few times about how angry I was with a lot of people reacting with like somebody like, hey, here's Afghan women talking about how scared they are of the Taliban. And then it was like, Lumau, woke imperialism, not saying people like Mitch McConnell don't use that for like a real concern, but then people will come up with that take when Afghan women are legitimately terrified. Every Afghan that I've talked about in my community, even the ones who are somewhat critical of my foreign policy, when I talk to them about this topic, they'll tell me, yes, people are legitimately scared of the Taliban and exactly the impact that'll have on women's rights. And the polling data from the Asia Foundation seems to reflect that. Lexifer's in my chat right now. I don't want to like ask him to back me up here, but I would just ask him, is it a real concern?
I can't see the chat. So
yeah, he'll answer in a second.
Yeah,
there he is. Yeah, it's a real concern. So that's the thing. People, I feel like in their justified anger of a war that's gone on for too long and been mismanaged, and they're so eager to get out the door, which I 100% understand, that it seems that all other concerns about how to do this responsibly or the effects that this will have in other areas are completely dismissed. Even though those effects are on that local population there that they're claiming to speak for, even though we have the polling data that we can directly look at and they can speak for themselves. The Afghan population can speak for themselves. We just need to look at the polling data.
Yeah, I don't think we disagree at all. I think I actually, in my Reddit post, I talked about how I felt like populism was, I think the quote was, digging its smooth-brained claws into a lot of people, especially on this issue, where it's literally just, we need to get out any like American intervention, any war, insert anything here, always bad. Of course, it usually is, but not to the degree that like it's usually not black and white or totally one-sided. It's usually a very complicated situation with a lot of cultural, historical, and many more aspects that I can't even think to list off right now that account for why we do what we do, right? And just like you said, the example that you gave, this is something I saw a lot of in the comments of my post. People were like, oh, so do you want women to have their rights taken away if the Taliban retake power? And they were like, we've been there for too long. We made this mess. It's time to leave. It's not our problem. Those people are what really pissed me off and are the ones who sort of pushed me into having this like massive Twitter argument arc, I guess you could say.
Yeah, okay. That's cool. I guess I was a little confused by the video at all because it's just at the beginning it seemed like you just didn't want to withdraw from Afghanistan.
That's just poor wording on my part. I apologize.
Okay. Got it.
I remember I watched a video, I forget what channel. It was from like a mainstream news outlet, but they posted the video to YouTube and they were interviewing women who owned businesses in Kabul, I believe. And they were very, very scared that once America like pulls out troops or withdraws troops, that the Taliban might come and take away their ability to have their business.
Yeah, there's a huge, the thing is the Taliban, and we were talking about we talked about Sunni Shia earlier, when we actually talked about the Hazara population of Afghanistan. They should be absolutely terrified of the Taliban taking over. The Hazara population was slaughtered by the Taliban. Slaughtered. They would be brought out in the public square and have their throats slit. They would be shot once they're due to, like, I remember at one point, like, it was like 3,000 Taliban prisoners were killed. And in response, even though the Hazara population didn't do it, they just went out and just slaughtered the Hazara population. They are an extremely brutal organization. They would beat women in the public square, ban women from working. They would ban. They are probably like one of the most disgusting organizations to have ever like existed in that country, and it's a real concern of the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan returning. It's a real concern when you have 85,000 people who have picked up guns and are ready to fight for that. And I'm concerned, of course, that the peace negotiations will not go through. And there's a lot of concerns about this. There's a million concerns we should have about it. Like, for example, the Taliban doesn't really have an amazing track record, I would say, when it comes to these types of things. But specifically, I would talk about how a ceasefire has yet to truly develop, that there's still IEDs are still going off, civilians are still dying. There is still instances of the Taliban taking over, like, what was it recently? It was like 138 more outposts. And these are like checkpoints where they like check for like terrorists that are going through areas. I remember reading somewhere, I'd have to go back and find the source, but there's been an increase of about like 70% of attacks on the ANA. There's real pressure being heated up. And of course, they don't have the same power that they had in 2001 pre-invasion, when they controlled like 90% of the country, besides the north of the country was controlled by the Northern Alliance. But they have a lot of power. And so I think this is a real concern. It isn't just this idea of like, we're just staying there, and the people who are bringing up concerns about women's rights just want to stay there forever. It's like, no, the people are legitimately concerned. And I think a lot of people dismissing those concerns are kind of going a little mask off about not really having fully developed their foreign policy positions, and not really thinking about the local populations as they claim to be like speaking for them. And so I would also, sorry, yeah, you want to say something?
Oh no, I feel the same way, and I will be the first to tell you that I don't even know all that much about foreign policy. I just did like a basic bit of research on the situation. Was like, wow, this is a pretty interesting topic, and I feel like the takes I've seen on Twitter are very much against what all of this data, the polling data here, and the history of what's going on here seems to suggest. And I honestly think that any lefty who claims that we should just get out of there right away, fuck it, we're gone, would be hypocritical. And that's basically what motivated me to make the video. And then after I started getting dogpiled for my take, someone sent me your video, and I was like, oh wow, Dylan explains it pretty well here, and I linked it to some people on Twitter.
Can I respond to something in your chat? I've been looking at it for a second. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So he is literally just agreeing with Zan and pretending he doesn't. Okay, let me be very clear. I started this conversation off because in the video, and Zan, again, he just said, and if he doesn't agree with it, like he just said, then we're fine, we agree. But the video that I watched, he said that we shouldn't leave Afghanistan. So that's where I had a disagreement. But he said he just miscommunicated his position. So yeah, we do agree. I'm not saying we disagree.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people, including myself a little bit, kind of feel like since the Lawrence Southern debate that you haven't really liked me all that much. So I think a lot of people assume that you came in sort of looking for a reason to disagree with me or go in for blood sports.
I said I disagree with him 50%. Well, yeah, but so if his position is the reason why I said that is I came into this discussion having watched the video and been communicated to that he disagrees with withdrawing from Afghanistan. And then the reason he gave was for women's rights and humanitarian concerns. I agree with the humanitarian rights and humanitarian concerns. So that's 50% of the position I agree on. The other 50%, the withdrawal, I disagree on. That's where I got the 50% from.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I thought you meant like 50% of the video. I know that
No, the only part of the video I was the Sunni Shia thing, which I just don't think applies to Afghanistan at all.
Okay, yeah. That's a really complicated topic. I know that
it would be seen as more like an ethnic struggle, I would say. Or more than anything.
Yeah, Afghanistan is pretty big, and geographically, like I think something that I noticed a lot, and I don't think anybody here in the West, in quotes, is invincible to this or immune to this, is an overgeneralization of the overall region of like the Middle East and a bit more into the East, as well as like going down into Africa and stuff like that. There's like a very big overgeneralization. It seems it's hard to put into words, but I think you can probably word it better than I can because you focus on a lot of this part of the world when it comes to your foreign policy talks. It feels like a lot of Americans, even like very woke lefties, don't have a tendency to generalize these regions as a whole.
Yeah, that does happen a lot. I've had a lot of conversations about Afghanistan, and what I've learned very quickly is that a lot of people have, I mean, of course, people have surface level analysis because this is extremely complicated issue, right? But people have a really surface level of analysis of a lot of these conflicts. And when they hear, and they don't understand that these conflicts are extremely messy, and the idea that there could be data points actually that are going to hurt because I accept that my position of pulling out of Afghanistan by September 11th could have very large downsides. I accept that. And I think a lot of people have to look down that barrel of the gun, and with the little information they have and how they've been perceived, how they've been like explained these conflicts, they're not willing to bite that bullet because they just want to pretend the bullet doesn't exist.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I like your idea of us pulling out regardless. Okay, hold on. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. So from what I've seen, it does not look like the Taliban are even somewhat like interested in having a peace agreement. Like they've all it almost seems like they've doubled down. Like
Yep.
when I look, yeah,
They've
everything
increased
that I've seen-
attacks on the ANA. They just recently delayed the talks in Turkey. They said they would resume it after Ramadan. I guess we'll see if that happens. Yeah, and if they still have ties with Al Qaeda, they don't have Al Qaeda training camps within Afghanistan, so that's technically not a breaking of the agreement, but they still have ties with Al Qaeda. Yeah, there's a lot of things that's concerning.
Yeah, a little loophole there. Yeah, it seems like even if we could, and they're just doubling down right now, but even if we could get them to agree to a peace deal, like you said, they don't have the best track record, you know? I don't know. I feel like I wish I could see the future to know what the correct thing to do here is, because it seems like either way, it's
There's not a
lose-lose.
correct thing, it's the least bad option.
Yeah.
That's how people should view a lot of foreign policy. When it comes to decisions like this, is you got to pick the least bad option. Because here's another thing: when people negotiate stuff in like deals, whether in politics or in foreign policy, it's a negotiation. Negotiation doesn't mean you go in, get everything you want, and leave. Usually, negotiation means you usually have to give a little and take a little, and depending on the
Compromise.
position you have and how much leverage you have, that usually dictates how much you can negotiate. And right now, the problem is we don't have nearly as much leverage as we wish we did, and that's the problem. And that's why there's so many bullets that we have to bite. And I think like one thing that I've heard consistently from like interviews and stuff from the ground is a lot of people just want to make sure that the international community doesn't forget Afghanistan exists once the 18,000 NATO troops leave the country. And I want to see that continued support, the humanitarian existence, selling of weapons either at a discount or even giving. I would even be willing to, personally, I'm fine with just straight up giving them weapons. Now there's an actual moral debate to be had, and about like, well, is it even our responsibility? Because technically NATO like signed a treaty in like what was 2014 that like by 2015 or 2014 that the right to defending the country would be 100% in the ANA's hands. But I have a worldview of I do not believe that a border dictates someone's moral consideration. I understand that governments only have so much power and how much they can consider the moral weight of somebody outside of their borders, but I don't believe that that border dictates whether somebody should get consideration or should not get consideration as a human being. And that's why I care so much personally about trying to find the best option, even if it comes at it comes at a financial expense of the United States. Not to mention, if we withdraw from the country, that's going to be a huge dip in cost for us generally. So I find the complaints about costs for the stuff that I'm proposing right here to be a little penny pinching, you know?
Yeah, considering obviously if we pull out, then we're probably gonna have a little bit of extra revenue there that we can use to go through with your plan. No, I agree. Yeah, I don't think we really have any disagreement. The one thing that I was really interested in and I wanted to ask you is that how you did your research on this. Like generally, I looked for like articles about it on Google, obviously, like look up currently like current events Afghanistan, and then like go through, click onto news and read everything that's going on. I like listen to some history videos about it. Where do you go to learn about these topics in general?
So it's difficult because it depends. I go personally. I go back to 1979 and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and I kind of start from there when it comes to this particular conflict because I'm not a history buff. You get me back to the 1800s with like British and Russian like conflict in Afghanistan, and you're gonna like it honestly gives me a few like it's not Duck or Z, it's just literally Z's. It's Resident Sleeper, but for me personally, what I usually do is I always look at polling data. I think polling data, when you're looking at any conflict for what the people on the ground think is important, I think a good way to start for a lot of people is, and do your best to find one that's the most unbiased, is documentaries. And this is what I do personally. I don't know if this is recommended for everybody. And what I do is I'll look in the documentary for like keywords of events and people, and I'll write those down in a book, and then I'll go off later and try to do as many research on those specific keywords. Like if someone says the word Hazra, then I'll go out and look up what exactly is Hazra. Okay, who is Ashraf Ghani, the current leader of the country? And I go and kind of sprawl out. It's like I'm building this tree of knowledge, you know. Like I'm like the original seed was like this documentary, and from it all these branches and leaves kind of grow out of it. You can also do this with books, news articles, and really anything. But I like doing it with documentaries.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I read a couple of yeah. Obviously, I read a few articles about it, but I also watched a few documentaries that mostly went into the details about like, correct me if I'm wrong here, like the Soviet Union came to Afghanistan and they were supporting, I believe they were supporting like it was some like militia group or small army that was had like a communist vaguely communist idea. I don't know if they were actually communist. I haven't looked
What are
into
you
that
talking about
particular.
specifically? In which group?
I don't remember the name of it. I think there was
Okay.
like a communist revolution of some kind happening in Afghanistan, and the
1978.
Soviets.
Yep.
Occurred.
So
Yeah.
the complicated thing about that is that basically there was like there was the Afghan government, and there was a crackdown on the communists in the country. And during that crackdown, the response was the revolution that led to the government collapsing. And then there was a bunch of infighting between the communists in the country. And there was assassinations and killings and extremely brutal repressions. And that's when the Soviet Union kind of invaded. And then the communist government of Afghanistan and the Soviet Union's conflict for about 10 years was an extremely brutal war. And something you can do quickly is if you let me put it this way. When we invaded Afghanistan, we were still finding mass graves. We found mass graves outside of prisons and finding the stories of tortures in prisons. And all you need to do is look up population of Afghanistan and look for the dip. And that dip is the war, where millions of people were internally displaced. Many people were displaced, like, period, to Pakistan. And that's where a lot of the people were actually radicalized and what you would see the modern day Taliban. From these like
There are
hardcore
people
Islamic
on Twitter
schools.
saying we should let Pakistan take care of things there, and I'm like, bro.
The ISI does not have a great track record in Afghanistan, and I don't think I would trust the ISI at all with almost anything. I mean, again, remember, because people like let Pakistan handle it, and then they'll complain about America giving like guns to the Mujahideen, even though what happened was we gave funds in guns to Pakistan, and their ISI gave it to the Mujahideen. They were literally the middleman. So if you're having these criticisms of it just doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense. I mean, again, it sounds more like it's their problem, not our problem. You know, that's what it sounds more of. If that's the argument, then I can't really argue with that because I just disagree with like the outlook. But yeah, that's how people look at it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, well, I don't think we disagree overall. I guess I did word things poorly, mostly because I'm not the greatest public speaker, but
That's
overall,
okay.
I think that like upon reiteration, especially on stream and on Twitter, most people in my audience have come to agree with me, or at least like accept my take. Like, hey, I think we should probably get out of there sooner than later, but I understand why you believe this, and like I get what's going on there. I learned a little bit, and you inspired me to research more into it. So overall, I think like oh, and I also got to root a few more populists out of my community, so that's always a good day. Overall, yeah.
Well,
Um,
I will say that I do appreciate the fact that you did look into the humanitarian concerns in Afghanistan when it comes to the rights of women, stuff like that, because I think a lot of people are overlooking that, or just being like, well, you know what? That's all just the war hawks complaining, whatever, and just dismissing it. And not that I think Mitch McConnell says women's rights in Afghanistan, and he's like really cares about the women's rights in Afghanistan. I don't think he really does, but I'm happy that you looked into it. I'm happy that you're talking about foreign policy as well.
yeah, it was just a really interesting topic. I like you gave me the list of things to do for the. By the way, I got to get whatever's going on with Whereby Fix because I have no idea what the issue is with that. I did like a bunch of research for that panel, and I got really sucked into the Afghanistan topic, and I was like, wow, this is really interesting.
Yeah, foreign policy is really a really interesting topic that can really suck you in and just take you all around the world in a very quick period of time as you just dig into these topics. That's why I love foreign policy. That's why I'm studying international relations.
I have to admit though, I am a little disappointed. I've been doing a lot of, I've been researching this topic, but I haven't found the part where Big Boss fights Sahelanthropus in the mountains of Afghanistan yet. I don't know how, but that hasn't been mentioned yet, so that's a little disappointing.
Anyway, man, you have a good day, okay?
All right, have a good one. It's been
Have a
fun
good
talking.
one, okay?
Okay, have a good
Okay.
stream.